Story 1. The Call Light. The call light in room 412 had been going off every 20 minutes since midnight. I was the only nurse on the floor. I checked on Mr. Harlan the first time at 12:14. He was asleep, deeply asleep, the kind that takes effort to break. I reset the light and moved on. At 12:34, it went off again. He was still asleep. I stood in the doorway longer than I should have. The room smelled different, not medical, something older. I told myself it was the cleaning solution they'd switched brands on. I told myself a lot of things that night. At 1:02, I stopped at the nurse's station to chart. The hallway was empty in both directions. The overhead lights buzzed at a frequency I'd never noticed before, or maybe I had and just never been alone enough to hear it. The call light went off again, 4:12. I walked slower this time. Mr. Harlan's eyes were open. He was staring at the ceiling with the kind of stillness that makes you check for breathing. I checked. He was breathing. I said his name. He didn't respond. I touched his arm, and he turned his head toward me so slowly, it felt mechanical. He said, "She was just here." I asked who. He turned back to the ceiling and closed his eyes. I checked the visitor log. No one had been in since 7 p.m. I checked the hallway cameras at the station. The feed for the east corridor, the one outside 412, was showing a still image. Not frozen exactly, just the same empty hallway, same angle, same shadow beneath the supply cart. I watched it for 4 minutes. Nothing moved, not even the way things normally shift under fluorescent light. I called the on-call tech. He said the system sometimes loops on low-motion feeds to save storage. He said it like it was nothing. At 2:15, I heard footsteps, not the soft shuffle of a confused patient, deliberate, unhurried, coming from the east corridor. I walked to the edge of the hallway and looked. Empty, but the supply cart had moved, 3 feet closer to room 412 than it had been an hour ago. I called down to the security desk. Jerry picked up on the 4th ring, groggy. He said no one had badged into the floor since 11 p.m. At 3:40, Mr. Harlan's monitor alarmed. His vitals were fine. A lead had come loose, but when I leaned over to reattach it, he grabbed my wrist. His grip was too strong for a 73-year-old man 2 days post-surgery. He didn't look at me. He looked past me at the door and said very quietly, "Don't let her back in." The door was open. I had closed it behind me. 2 overhead lights had gone out in the stretch directly outside his room. I could see a shape near the stairwell door that was too still to be anything moving and too defined to be a shadow. I watched it for a long time. Then I looked away to silence the monitor. When I looked back, it was gone. Mr. Harlan was discharged 4 days later. As the transport aide wheeled him out, he stopped and asked for me by name. He said, "I hope she didn't follow you home." I checked the maintenance log for those lights outside room 412. No one had filed a report. No one had replaced the bulbs. According to the log, they had never gone out. Story 2. The Patient in 7B. I worked the overnight shift in the psychiatric ward for 3 years. You learn to read the floor fast, who's stable, who's cycling, who you check on twice. Room 7B was empty the night it started. I did my 2 a.m. rounds and marked it on the clipboard like always. Clean room, stripped bed, lights off. I moved on. At 3:15, I passed 7B again on my way to the medication room. The light under the door was on. I assumed housekeeping had left it on. I pushed the door open. The bed was made, not stripped, made. Sheets pulled tight, pillows centered, the way we prepare a room for incoming admissions. Except we had no admissions scheduled until 8 a.m., and housekeeping didn't come until 6. I stood there long enough to feel stupid about it, then turned the light off and moved on. At 4, the charge nurse called me from the station. She asked if I had admitted anyone to 7B. I said no. She said the sensor bed was reading occupied. I went back. I opened the door slowly this time. The light was on again. The bed looked the same, tight, clean, undisturbed. But the sensor panel on the wall was blinking green, occupied, 142 pounds. I walked to the bed and pressed my hand into the mattress. It was warm. I pulled my hand back. I am not someone who panics. I stood there and I breathed, and I pressed my hand down again. Still warm, the specific warmth of a body that had just been there, or was still there in some way I couldn't account for. I called the charge nurse. She came down. She pressed her hand into the mattress. She looked at me and said nothing for a moment, then said we'd log it as a sensor malfunction. We both knew that wasn't what it was. I finished my shift. I signed out. I walked to my car in the parking structure and sat there for a while before I started the engine. When I got home, I looked up the room number in the hospital's old records database, something I had access to for transfer documentation. Room 7B had been occupied 12 years earlier by a patient who had never been discharged. The file listed her status as transfer pending. The transfer had never been completed. Nobody had updated the record. I don't know if that explains anything. I'm not sure I want it to.
I went back the next night. Same shift, same floor, same rounds. At 2 a.m., I stood outside room 7B. No light under the door. I looked through the window. Stripped bed, dark room, sensor panel off. Everything as it should have been the night it started. Everything exactly as it should have been.